The sky above IV burned orange and red. Smoke rose from the cities below like dark fingers reaching toward the stars. Ships fell from the sky, some in pieces, some still trying to fly. The Dominion had come, and they had come with fire. Pressed her small body against the cold stone wall of the shelter. She was 8 cycles old, with soft gray fur and large golden eyes that had seen too much in the last 3 days. Her mother stood near the entrance, watching the sky through a crack in the broken door. Others huddled in the darkness around them. Old ones, young ones, all of them afraid. "The coalition ships are coming," someone whispered. "They promised they will save us." Wanted to believe it. She had heard the stories about the Galactic Coalition. They were supposed to protect everyone. They were supposed to be the good ones. Her teacher had told her that the coalition kept peace across 1,000 worlds. Surely they would not let them burn her home. Her mother turned and knelt beside her. She was beautiful even now, even with ash in her fur and fear in her eyes. She touched face gently. "Listen to me, little one," she said. "Whatever happens, you must be brave. Can you do that for me?" Nodded, though her heart was beating so fast she thought it might break. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. Everyone in the shelter looked up. Hope filled their faces. The coalition had come. They were saved. The door burst open and a male stumbled inside. He was bleeding from a wound on his shoulder. His eyes were wild with panic. "They're leaving," he gasped. "The coalition ships, they're jumping away. They're not coming for us." For a moment no one moved. No one spoke. Then a terrible sound rose from the shelter. It was the sound of hope dying. Mothers pulled their cubs close. Old ones closed their eyes and began to pray. Someone was screaming. Maybe it was, she didn't know anymore. Her mother grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the shelter. "There is a drainage tunnel behind this building. It leads outside the city. You must run, run and don't look back." "Come with me," begged. "Mother, please." "I will follow, I promise. But first I must help the others. Go now, go." She pushed through a hole in the wall. The tunnel was dark and smelled of old water and fear. Crawled forward, her small hands scraping against rough stone. Behind her, she heard her mother's voice one last time. "I love you, little one. Be brave." Then there was fire. Then there was silence. Crawled until she couldn't crawl anymore. She found a place where the tunnel widened and curled into a ball. She didn't cry. She was too broken to cry. She just lay there in the darkness, alone, waiting for something she couldn't name. Far above the burning world, past the blockade of warships, past the debris of destroyed vessels, a small freighter drifted through the cold of space. The ship was called the Steadfast, and it was not much to look at. Its hull was from years of hard travel. Its engines were old but reliable. It was a working ship, built for carrying cargo through dangerous places. On the bridge, a woman named sat in the captain's chair. She was 32 years old, with black hair cut short and eyes that had seen their share of trouble. She had been running supplies to the outer colonies when the distress call came through. Now she sat listening to it for the 3rd time, her crew gathered around her. The voice on the recording was desperate. "This is IV. They have invaded. We are under attack. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. The coalition has abandoned us. Please, our children are dying." The message ended. Static filled the bridge. The first officer was a tall man with a serious face. He crossed his arms and shook his head slowly. "Captain, I know what you're thinking, and I'm telling you it's suicide." "Probably," said quietly. "They have 40 warships in that system. We have 1 freighter with no weapons. The coalition has already declared it a non-intervention zone. That means no help, no backup, nothing." "I heard the message." "Then you heard them say the coalition left. If the coalition won't help, what can we possibly do?" Stood and walked to the main viewport. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of a star. Somewhere near that star, people were dying. Children were dying, and the galaxy was looking the other way. She thought about her own childhood. She thought about the Earth frontier wars when her colony had been attacked and everyone had expected help that never came. She thought about the stranger who had pulled her from the rubble of her home when she was 9 years old, a man whose name she never learned, a man who had died getting her to safety. "Set course for IV," she said. Stared at her, "Captain." "That's in order." The ship's engineer looked up from her console. She was young, barely 25, with clever hands and a quick mind. "The jump will take us right through controlled space. Our shields won't hold if they hit us with anything serious." "Then we'll have to be fast," said. "Find us a path through the asteroid belt on the system's edge. They won't follow us there." "That's insane," said flatly. "Yes." The medic was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. Now he stepped forward, his medical bag already over his shoulder. "How many people do you think we can save?" he asked. Looked at him. "I don't know, maybe none, maybe a few, does it matter?" Considered this for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He walked to a station and began preparing for casualties. Let out a long breath. He had served with for 6 years. He knew that look in her eyes. There was no point in arguing. "Fine," he said. "But when we all die, I want it on record that I said this was a bad idea." "Noted," said with a small smile. The Steadfast turned toward the burning star. Its old engines hummed with new purpose. On the bridge, 4 humans prepared to do something impossible. Far below, in a dark tunnel on a dying world, a small gray cub lay curled in the darkness. She had stopped waiting for help. She had stopped believing in rescue. Everyone had abandoned them. The coalition, the other worlds, everyone. She didn't know that somewhere in the cold of space, a ship was coming. She didn't know that a woman she had never met was risking everything to reach her. She didn't know that in a galaxy full of cowards, there were still a few who refused to look away. All she knew was darkness. But the light was coming. The asteroid belt was a graveyard of stone and ice. Rocks the size of mountains tumbled through the darkness, spinning slowly in the endless cold. No sane pilot would fly through it. The patrol ships certainly wouldn't follow. Gripped the control stick with both hands as the Steadfast dove into the chaos. Alarms screamed. The hull groaned. A rock the size of a house scraped along their left side, tearing away a section of outer plating. "Shields at 40%, called out, her voice tight with fear. "We lose much more and we're flying naked." "Just a little further," said through gritted teeth. Behind them, 2 interceptors had been following since they entered the system. Now they hung back at the edge of the asteroid field, unwilling to risk the dangerous passage. Could almost feel their frustration. A small cargo ship had slipped through their blockade, and there was nothing they could do about it. She pulled the Steadfast through a narrow gap between 2 spinning rocks, then dove sharply to avoid a third. The ship shuddered and screamed, but it held together. It always held together. That was why she had named it Steadfast. Finally, they broke through into clear space. Below them, IV filled the viewport. It was a beautiful world, or it had been once. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. Now half of it was covered in smoke. Cities burned on the night side, glowing like wounds in the darkness. "Find us a landing zone," said. "Somewhere the patrols aren't watching." Worked his console, scanning the surface. "There's a ruined city on the southern continent. Heavy damage, but I'm reading life signs. Survivors, maybe a few hundred." "That's where we go." The Steadfast descended through the atmosphere. The sky outside turned from black to orange to gray. Smoke filled everything. Had to fly by instruments alone, unable to see more than a few meters ahead. Finally, the ground appeared below them, and she brought the ship down in what had once been a city square. The crew gathered at the main hatch. Checked her weapon, a simple pulse pistol that wouldn't do much against armor but was better than nothing. Carried a heavier rifle. Had his medical bag. Stayed with the ship, ready to take off at a moment's notice. "We have maybe 2 hours before the notice we're here," said. "After that, we're dead." "Then we work fast," replied. She hit the door release and the hatch slid open. The smell hit her first, smoke and ash and something else, something she didn't want to think about. The city around them was destroyed. Buildings had collapsed into piles of rubble. Vehicles lay overturned and burning. Bodies were everywhere. Bodies, adults, children. Some of them had been trying to run. Forced herself to keep moving. They spread out, searching the ruins. Found a group of elderly hiding in a basement. Discovered a family of 5 trapped under a fallen wall and worked for 20 minutes to free them. Moved through the destruction alone, checking every shadow, every collapsed structure. She found the drainage tunnel by accident. She was walking past a pile of rubble when she heard something. A sound so faint she almost missed it. Breathing. Someone was breathing in the darkness below. Dropped to her knees and pulled away stones until she found the tunnel entrance. She activated the light on her helmet and crawled inside. The tunnel was narrow and dark and smelled of old water. She crawled for what felt like forever, following the sound of breathing. Then she saw her. A small cub curled into a ball in a wide section of the tunnel. Her gray fur was covered in ash and dirt. Her eyes were closed. She was so still that for a terrible moment thought she was dead. But then the cub's eyes opened. They were golden, like 2 small suns, and they were filled with more pain than any child should ever know. The cub saw and flinched back, pressing herself against the tunnel wall. "It's okay," said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub didn't respond. She just stared with those broken golden eyes. Reached out slowly, carefully, the way you might approach a wounded animal. The cub shrank back further, trembling. "My name is, I came from very far away. I'm here to help." For a long moment, nothing happened. The cub just stared at her, silent and afraid. Then in a voice so small it was barely a whisper, she spoke. "Everyone abandoned us." The words hit like a physical blow. She felt tears burning in her eyes, but she forced them back. This child needed strength, not tears. She reached up and removed her helmet so the cub could see her face. See that she was real. See that she was not going to disappear like everyone else. "I haven't," she said. The cub looked at her for a long, long time. Something shifted in those golden eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something close. Something like the first small spark of hope. Held out her hand. "Will you come with me? I have a ship. It's not pretty, but it's safe. I can take you away from here." The cub hesitated. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her small fingers were cold and trembling, but her grip was strong. "My name is," she whispered. "Hello, let's get you home." Carried her out of the tunnel, out of the darkness, into the gray light of the burning world. Wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, as if she was afraid that if she let go, she would wake up and find herself alone again. They made it back to the ship. Along the way, they found more survivors, 17 in total, mostly old ones and cubs, covered their retreat, firing at a patrol that had finally noticed their presence, worked without rest, treating wounds, giving medicine, keeping people alive. The Steadfast's cargo bay was never meant to hold passengers, but they made it work. Blankets were spread on the floor. Water was shared. Gave up her own bunk for a wounded elder. Carried to the bridge and set her down in the co-pilot's chair. "Stay here. Hold on to something. We're leaving." She took the controls and lifted the ship into the sky. Interceptors were already moving to cut them off. The Steadfast engine screamed as pushed them harder than they were ever meant to go. Weapons fire streaked past the viewport. Something hit the rear section of the ship. Alarms blared. "We've lost engine 2, shouted from the engine room. "I'm trying to reroute power, but—" "Just keep us flying," shouted back. She threw the ship into a sharp turn, diving toward the atmosphere's edge. The ships followed, but they were bigger and slower. The Steadfast was small and fast and desperate. They broke through the blockade with meters to spare, leaving the burning world behind. Sat in the co-pilot's chair, silent, watching the stars appear in the viewport. She had not let go of his jacket since they left the planet. Her small hand gripped the fabric so tightly that her knuckles were white. Looked at her. This small, broken child who had lost everything, who had been abandoned by a galaxy that was supposed to protect her. "You're safe now," said softly. "I promise." Didn't answer, but she didn't let go either. And that was enough. The Steadfast drifted through the darkness between stars. Its engines hummed quietly, pushing the wounded ship forward at a speed that felt like crawling. The damage from their escape was worse than had first thought. The hyperspace drive was completely destroyed. They would have to travel the long way, using only their conventional engines. 6 weeks. That was how long it would take to reach neutral space. 6 weeks of crawling through the empty void with limited food, limited medicine, and 17 refugees who had lost everything. Stood in the cargo bay watching the survivors. They had arranged themselves into small groups. Families stayed together. The old ones looked after the young ones. They were quiet, speaking in soft whispers, trying to make sense of a world that had been torn apart. In the corner, separate from everyone else, sat alone. She had not spoken since they left the planet. She would not eat unless brought her food. She would not sleep unless was nearby. The other had tried to approach her, but she flinched away from them, retreating further into her silence. Walked over to his face, tired but concerned. The cub is in shock, deep psychological trauma. Children form very strong bonds with their parents. Losing her mother like that, he shook his head. She has disconnected from everything. She doesn't trust anyone. "She trusts me," he said. "She attached to you because you saved her. But that attachment is fragile. It's built on fear, not love. She's afraid that if she lets you out of her sight, you'll disappear too." Looked at the small gray cub, alone in her corner, golden eyes staring at nothing. She remembered what it felt like to be that lost, that broken. She remembered the years after her own rescue, when she would wake up screaming, convinced that the people around her were already dead. "What do I do?" she asked. "Be patient, be present. Show her that you're not going anywhere. The rest will take time." Walked over to and sat down beside her. The cub didn't look at her, but she shifted slightly, moving a little closer, said nothing. She just sat there, a warm presence in the cold darkness. Days passed. The Steadfast continued its slow journey. Food was rationed carefully. Worked constantly to keep the damaged ship running. Took shifts watching the sensors, alert for any sign of pursuit. Moved among the refugees, treating injuries, offering comfort. Stayed with her. She started reading to her. Old Earth stories that she had loved as a child. Stories about brave heroes and magical kingdoms and happy endings. Didn't respond at first, but noticed that she listened. Her ears would twitch at exciting parts. Her eyes would follow his face as she spoke. After a week asked for a story. Her voice was so soft that almost missed it, but she heard, and she read. After 2 weeks started eating without being asked. She would sit beside at meal times, eating quietly, still not speaking much but present. After 3 weeks she asked a question. "What is Korea?" Blinked surprised. "Korea, it's a place on a country, my grandmother was from there. Why do you ask?" "You speak strange words sometimes. When you're tired, I don't understand them." Smiled. She hadn't realized she was doing it. When she was exhausted, she sometimes slipped into Korean, the language her grandmother had taught her. Old habits from childhood. "They're Korean words, my grandmother's language. Would you like to learn some?" Nodded slowly. So taught her. Simple words at first. Hello, goodbye, thank you, yes, no. Repeated them carefully, her small voice wrapping around the unfamiliar sounds. She was a quick learner. By the end of the week, she could count to 10 and ask for water. One night woke to find standing beside her bunk, trembling. The nightmares had come again. They always came. lifted her blanket and climbed in beside her. The small body was warm and shaking, held her close, stroking her soft gray fur, whispering quiet words until the trembling stopped. "I don't want to dream anymore," whispered in the darkness. "I know. I had dreams like that too when I was young. They get better, not soon, but eventually." "Did someone hold you when the dreams came?" Was quiet for a moment. "No, I was alone, but you won't be. I'm here." Pressed closer. "Promise." "Promise." They both slept. The fifth week brought trouble. Sensors detected a ship approaching fast. A patrol cruiser, probably searching the common trade routes for fleeing. The Steadfast was damaged and slow. They couldn't outrun it. The crew gathered on the bridge. The refugees huddled in the cargo bay, silent with fear, stood in the doorway, watching with wide golden eyes. "We can't fight them," said flatly. "We have no weapons, and even if we did, that cruiser would destroy us in seconds." "If we surrender, they might let the refugees live," said, though his voice was bitter. "They sometimes take prisoners for labor camps." Gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white. Labor camps, slavery, death by slow work and starvation. She had heard the stories. She would not let end up in a place like that. "There's a nebula," she said suddenly, pointing at the star chart. 2 hours from here, dense gases, sensor interference. If we can reach it, they won't be able to track us." 2 hours, said. "They'll catch us in one. Then we make them work for it." Pushed the engines harder than they had ever been pushed. The ship groaned. Metal screamed. Warning lights flashed across every console. Behind them, the cruiser closed in, weapons charging. They were not going to make it. Then walked onto the bridge. She moved past, and stood beside's chair. She looked up at the woman who had saved her, the woman who had held her through the nightmares, the woman who had refused to leave her behind. "Don't give up," said. Her voice was small but steady. "You didn't give up on us." Something broke inside. Something that had been wound tight with fear and desperation finally snapped. She looked at this small, brave child who had lost everything and still found the strength to speak. "No," said quietly, "I didn't." She turned back to the controls. Her mind raced. There had to be a way. There was always a way. The nearby asteroid field. Small. Not as dense as the one they had used to enter the system, but maybe, just maybe, it could buy them time. "Hold on to something," said. Then she dove the Steadfast into the rocks. The cruiser hesitated. It was a big ship. The asteroid field was small but dangerous. For a long moment it hung back, trying to find a safe path. That hesitation was enough. The Steadfast burst through the other side of the field and raced toward the nebula. By the time the cruiser found a path through, it was too late. The Steadfast disappeared into the swirling gases, vanishing from sensors, gone. On the bridge, everyone was silent, then laughed. It was a rough, exhausted laugh, but it was real. "I can't believe that worked." Slumped back in her chair, her hands shaking. She looked at, still standing beside her, still watching her with those golden eyes. "You saved us," said softly. Shook her head. "You saved us, I just reminded you." She climbed into his lap, curled up against her chest, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. Halon Station hung in the darkness of space like a city made of metal and light. It was massive, home to millions of beings from 100 different worlds. Trade ships came and went constantly, their engines leaving trails of light against the stars. It was supposed to be a place of safety, a neutral ground where no war could reach. The Steadfast limped toward the station on failing engines. 6 weeks of hard travel had pushed the old ship to its limits. Smoke leaked from cracks in the hull. Half the systems were held together with temporary repairs and desperate hope, but they had made it. They were safe. Or so thought. The docking process took hours. Coalition officials came aboard to inspect the ship and its passengers. They wore clean uniforms and carried data tablets, their faces blank and professional. They counted the refugees. They checked identification. They asked questions. Stood on the bridge, watching the officials move through her ship. Sat in the co-pilot's chair, her golden eyes following the strangers with suspicion. In the weeks of travel she had grown closer to. She spoke more now. She laughed sometimes, but she still didn't trust anyone else. Finally, a senior official approached. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that showed no emotion. His name badge read Director. "Captain," he said, his voice flat, "I need to speak with you privately." They went to the small meeting room off the bridge, closed the door and turned to face her. "You've created a serious problem," he said. Felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. "Excuse me. IV is in controlled space. The coalition has officially declared it a non-intervention zone. By rescuing these refugees, you've violated about a dozen treaties. They are already filing complaints. They're calling this an act of aggression." "Aggression?" His voice rose. "They invaded a peaceful world. They murdered thousands of innocent people. I saved 17 survivors and you're calling me the aggressor." His expression didn't change. "I understand your feelings, Captain, but you have to understand the political situation. The coalition cannot be seen as taking sides in the conflict. If we accept these refugees openly, it could be interpreted as support for resistance. That could destabilize the entire region." "So what are you saying? You're going to send them back?" "No, that would be too obvious, but we can't give them full asylum either. For now, they'll be placed in a holding facility while we review the situation." "A holding facility? You mean a prison?" "I mean a temporary residence while we determine the proper course of action." Stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "Those people lost their homes, their families, their entire world, and you want to lock them up because accepting them might be politically inconvenient." His eyes finally showed something. Annoyance. "Captain, I suggest you calm down. You're in no position to make demands. Your ship violated coalition space regulations. Your cargo was undocumented. Technically, we could seize your vessel and charge you with illegal transport of displaced persons." The threat hung in the air between them. Said nothing. She just stared at him with cold fury in her eyes. Adjusted his data tablet and turned toward the door. "The refugees will be transferred to Holding Block 7 within the hour. You and your crew are free to go, provided you leave coalition space within 3 days. I suggest you use that time to find new employment. Your current career choices seem unwise." He left without another word. Stood alone in the meeting room, shaking with rage. She thought about the journey, the danger, the sacrifices, had been wounded protecting the refugees during their escape, had worked for weeks without sleep to keep the ship running, had risked his life a dozen times. And for what? So these people could trade one prison for another. She walked back to the bridge. Her crew was waiting for her. So was still sitting in the co-pilot's chair, watching with worried eyes. "What did he say?" asked. "Told them everything." When she finished, the bridge was silent. Spoke first, "We can't let this happen." "What choice do we have?" asked bitterly. "We're 4 people on a broken ship. The coalition has fleets. They have laws. They have power. We have nothing." "We have the truth," said quietly. Everyone looked at her. "I recorded everything. The distress calls from IV, the coalition ships leaving, the destruction, the bodies. I recorded it all." His eyes widened. "You want to leak it to who?" "To everyone. Every independent news network. Every human colony. Every species that's ever been threatened by the. Let them see what happened. Let them see who helped and who looked away." Nodded slowly. "It could work. If enough people see what happened, the coalition will have to respond. Public pressure is the one thing they can't ignore." "It could also make us enemies of both thee and the coalition," said. "If this goes wrong, We'll never be able to dock at a coalition station again. They'll put bounties on our heads. Looked at her crew. These people who had followed her into danger without question, who had trusted her when common sense said to run. I won't force anyone, she said. This is my choice to make. If you want to walk away, I understand. Find another ship, start fresh. No one will blame you. Laughed. It was a tired sound, but genuine. I've been with you for 6 years, Captain. I didn't follow you through a blockade just to walk away now. Nodded. Same. Besides, someone has to keep this ship running. You'd crash it within a week without me. Simply touched the medical bag at his side. There are people who need help. That's enough reason for me. Felt warmth spread through her chest. She had chosen her crew well. Then a small voice spoke from the co-pilot's chair. What about me? Walked over and knelt beside. The cub's golden eyes were serious, searching. She was still so young, so fragile, but there was strength in those eyes too, strength that had survived the burning of her world. What do you want to do? Asked softly. I want to stay with you. I want to help. It might be dangerous. Everything is dangerous, but you're here. That makes it okay. Took her small hand and held it gently. Then you'll stay with me, whatever happens. They released the recordings that night. Every image, every sound, every terrible moment of the IV massacre. It spread across the networks like fire, jumping from system to system, world to world. People who had never heard of IV watched in horror. Species who had suffered under expansion added their voices. Human colonies, independent and proud, began sending aid to refugees. Within days, the coalition was facing a storm of criticism. How could they abandon a peaceful world? How could they turn away survivors? The questions came from everywhere, from representatives and citizens and journalists. They had no answers. 2 weeks later, the coalition officially granted asylum to all refugees. Sanctions were announced against the Dominion. Peacekeeping ships were dispatched to protect remaining worlds. It was not justice. The dead were still dead, the lost were still lost, but it was something, a beginning. The Dominion responded with fury. They declared and her crew enemies of the state. A bounty was placed on their heads, high enough to tempt every mercenary and bounty hunter in the sector. Received the news calmly. She had expected it. What do we do now? Asked. Looked at the stars through the bridge viewport. Somewhere out there, people were suffering. Somewhere out there, ships were burning and worlds were dying. The galaxy was full of abandoned people, waiting for someone to notice them. We keep going, she said. There are others who need help, others who have been left behind. Shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're going to get us all killed, Captain. Probably, agreed, but not today. The Steadfast's engines roared to life, repaired and ready for new journeys. The old ship turned toward the darkness between stars, carrying its small crew toward whatever came next. In the co-pilot's chair, watched the stars appear one by one. She was not afraid, not anymore. She was going home. 1 year had passed since the Steadfast escaped from IV. 1 year since a broken ship with a desperate crew had changed the course of galactic politics. 1 year since a small gray cub had whispered that everyone had abandoned her, and a human woman had promised to stay. The ship was different now. Better. The donations that had poured in from human colonies across the sector had allowed to rebuild the Steadfast from the engines up. New shields, new medical bay, new living quarters. It was still not a pretty ship, but it was strong and fast and ready for anything. The crew had grown too. Where once there had been 4, now there were 8. Volunteers who had seen the recordings from IV and decided they wanted to help. Pilots and engineers and medics who believed that someone should answer the calls that the coalition ignored. They called themselves the Remnant Rescue. It was Sci-Dia, a name for the unofficial organization they had become. They went to conflict zones and disaster areas, extracting civilians from places where no official help would come. They had saved hundreds of lives in the past year, maybe thousands, had stopped counting. The bounty on their heads had only grown larger. Other enemies had added their own rewards. There were people across the galaxy who wanted dead. She had learned to sleep with a weapon nearby and to trust very few outside her crew. But there were also people who called her a hero, people who named their children after her, people who hung her picture in their homes and told stories about the woman who wouldn't look away, tried not to think about that too much. It made her uncomfortable. She wasn't a hero. She was just someone who couldn't say no when people needed help. Had grown in the past year. She was 9 cycles old now, taller and stronger, her gray fur sleek and healthy. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less often. The hollow look in her golden eyes had been replaced by something brighter, curiosity, joy, hope. Had adopted her officially, signing the papers under both human and law. The ceremony had been small, just the crew gathered in the ship's common room. Had cried, but they were good tears, happy tears. She had called Mother for the first time that night in a small, uncertain voice. Had cried too. Now was a full member of the crew. She helped in the medical bay, learning to treat wounds and comfort the frightened. She studied star charts with tracing routes between worlds with her small finger. She followed into the engine room, asking endless questions about how things worked and why. She was healing. Slowly, day by day, she was becoming whole again. One evening, the Steadfast drifted in quiet space between missions. The engines hummed softly. The stars outside the viewports burned with gentle light. Most of the crew was asleep, exhausted from their latest rescue. A passenger ship had been attacked by pirates near the outer colonies. The Steadfast had arrived in time to save 43 people. 3 of the crew had been wounded, but everyone would recover. Sat alone on the observation deck watching the stars. It was her favorite place on the ship. Quiet, peaceful, a place where she could think. The door slid open and soft footsteps approached, walked across the deck and sat down beside her. She was wearing her favorite shirt, the one with the small Korean characters that had taught her to read. It said "Brave Heart." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, then spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you come for us? That day on IV, you didn't know us, you could have died, everyone else left. Why did you stay?" Was quiet for a long moment. She had thought about this question many times, turning it over in her mind like a stone. There were many answers she could give, many reasons she could list, but in the end, the truth was simple. "When I was young," she said softly, "my world was attacked too, not by the different enemies, but the result was the same: fire, death, everyone running, everyone screaming. I was 9 years old, about the same age you were." Listened, her golden eyes fixed on space. "The rescue ships came, but there weren't enough. People were being left behind. I was trapped under rubble alone, waiting to die. And then a man found me. I don't know his name. I never learned it. He pulled me out of the ruins and carried me to the last ship. But the ship was already full. There was no room for both of us." His voice caught slightly. Even after all these years, the memory was sharp. "He put me on the ship and stayed behind. He saved me and died doing it. I never got to thank him. I never got to ask him why he did it." She looked at this child who had become her daughter, at this small brave soul who had survived so much. "For a long time, I wondered why he made that choice, why he gave his life for a child he didn't know. And then I realized that the question didn't matter. What mattered was what I did with the life he gave me." She took small hand in hers. "I came for you because turning away would have meant becoming someone else. Someone who could watch children die and keep flying. Someone who could ignore the calls for help because answering them was dangerous. That's not who he saved. That's not who I want to be." Squeezed her hand tightly. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. "So am I." They sat together watching the stars. Somewhere out there, wars were being fought and worlds were burning. Somewhere out there, people were suffering and calling for help. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, and there were never enough ships, never enough time, never enough hands to save everyone. But here, on this small ship drifting through the darkness, there was love. There was family. There was a woman who refused to look away and a child who had learned to hope again. Mother looked at her daughter. The word still felt new, still felt precious. Yes. Thank you for not abandoning us. Pulled her close, wrapping her arms around the small, warm body. She held her daughter the way she wished someone had held her when she was 9 years old and the world was burning. Never, she promised. Never, never, never. Outside, the stars burned on in their endless patterns. The universe was cold and dark and full of danger, but in the warm light of the observation deck, in the arms of her mother, was safe. And that was everything. The Steadfast drifted on through the night, carrying its precious cargo of survivors and dreamers, heading toward whatever adventure came next. The galaxy was still broken. There was still so much pain, so much suffering, so much work to be done. But they would face it together, a small family, a stubborn crew, a ship that refused to stop flying. And somewhere in the darkness, in the ruins of fallen worlds and the silence of abandoned stations, others were waiting. Others who had been left behind. Others who had given up hope. They didn't know it yet, but help was coming. It always was.